I came home from my usual 12-hour night shift at Rush University Medical Center to find the locks on my own front door had been changed, and a bright yellow realtor's lockbox bolted to the handle like some cheap insult. My key didn't even fit anymore. Through the front window, I could see my living room furniture gone. The walls already patched and painted a sterile eggshell white that smelled of fresh latex. And a glossy, "Coming soon, open house" sign planted in the front yard like a victory flag. Elena's silver Lexus was parked across the street. Marcus stood on my porch in his tailored navy suit, arms folded, wearing the same smug half-smile he used when he closed another 7-figure funding round. My own daughter didn't even look at me. She just handed me a manila envelope without a word, the kind lawyers use when they want to watch someone's life evaporate. Inside was a copy of a durable power of attorney they'd had notarized 2 weeks earlier, complete with my forged signature and a psychologist's letter claiming I suffered from rapidly progressing cognitive decline. Another document was an application for emergency guardianship they planned to file that same afternoon. The cover letter, on crisp letterhead from their attorney, politely informed me that my home, the same 3-bedroom ranch I'd paid off with overtime, and my late husband's life insurance, would be listed at $685,000 within 48 hours. The proceeds, it stated, would be used to protect my best interests and cover the $1.14 million hole their leveraged crypto bets had blown through in the last 14 months. They had already drained the joint emergency account I kept for medical bills. $187,400 gone in 3 wire transfers routed through a Delaware LLC called Legacy Bridge Holdings LLC that listed Marcus as managing member and Elena as authorized signer. The bank statements they included as evidence of my incompetence showed only the withdrawals, not the fact that I had never authorized a single one. I stood there in my scrubs, still smelling of hospital antiseptic and cafeteria coffee, while the 2 people I had sacrificed everything for explained in calm, measured voices that it was time I moved into assisted living. Elena even patted my shoulder the way you might comfort a confused patient. "You'll be happier there, Mum. You won't have to worry about bills anymore. We're handling everything." I didn't scream. I didn't cry on the porch like some broken old woman in a Lifetime movie. I simply took the envelope, looked at the fresh paint on walls I had paid for with 28 years of night shifts, and felt something inside me click into place. Cold, sharp, and final. That was the moment I stopped being their walking ATM. I spent that first night in a $49 motel off I-55, the kind with buzzing fluorescent lights and thin walls that let me hear every argument from the next room. I sat on the edge of the lumpy bed with my laptop balanced on my knees and started digging. The first thing I did was pull every bank record I still had access to before they froze the remaining accounts. Line by line, I traced the $412,000 that had disappeared into shell company transfers, Venmo gifts, and crypto wallet addresses I recognized from Elena's old bragging texts. I photographed the forged notary stamp and the psychologist's suspiciously glowing letterhead. I saved every screenshot of the family group chat where they joked about finally getting the old house sold before Mum figures it out. By 3 a.m., I had a timeline so clean it could have been presented in federal court, and I hadn't shed a single tear. The next morning, I didn't call them. I didn't beg. Instead, I drove to a small public library in a neighboring suburb where nobody knew me, opened a new encrypted email account, and reached out to Dr. Alan Park, the retired head of cybersecurity at the hospital who used to tease me about my secret math hobby during slow night shifts. I told him I needed a quiet place to work and a trusted forensic accountant. Within 48 hours, he had introduced me to both. I told no one else. Not my sister in Seattle, not the neighbours who now gave me pitying looks when I passed them on the street. I let Eleanor and Marcus believe I was broken, living out of a suitcase, too humiliated to fight back. They even sent me a cheerful text with photos of the staged living room. New throw pillows, neutral art, the works, captioned, "Looks so much better already." I replied with a single thumbs-up emoji and went back to coding. Because while they were busy selling my life, I was quietly resurrecting the quantum encryption protocol I had been developing in fragments for the last 9 years. Late nights after shifts, weekends when Elena was in college and I told her I was just catching up on paperwork. The core algorithm had been mine long before they ever touched my accounts. I had filed provisional patents under my maiden name, Dr. Lydia Moreau, 14 months before the forgery, timestamps that would be impossible to fake. The Department of Defense had been quietly funding the classified extension of that work through a university lab I consulted for on the side. They just didn't know the lead researcher was the same tired night nurse whose daughter was trying to evict her. I worked in silence. I ate gas station sandwiches and slept 5 hours a night. I let the realtor's sign stay up. I let the for sale flyers pile up on my old mailbox. Every time Elena called to check on me, I answered in the weary, defeated voice they expected. Yes, I was looking at facilities. Yes, the motel was fine, for now. No, I didn't want to cause any trouble. Inside, the cold fury had turned into something surgical. 3 weeks after the locks changed, I received the official notice of the guardianship hearing scheduled for the following Monday. Their attorney had attached a new bank statement showing my inability to manage funds. What they didn't know was that my own attorney, quietly retained through Dr. Park, had already filed an emergency motion to vacate the fraudulent power of attorney, supported by a forensic accountant's affidavit, detailing the unauthorized transfers and a chain of custody report on the forged documents. I also filed a separate civil complaint for financial elder abuse under Illinois law, complete with screenshots, wire records, and the LLC filings that traced every stolen dollar straight back to Marcus's venture accounts. But the real hammer was still hidden. On the morning of the hearing, I walked into the Cook County Courthouse wearing the same navy blazer I'd bought for Elena's college graduation. My hair was pulled back, my posture straight. Eleanor and Marcus were already seated at their table, looking smug in their matching power outfits, their attorney shuffling papers like this was just another Tuesday cleanup. They didn't even glance at me until the judge called the case. Then my attorney stood and asked the court to admit new evidence, recently unsealed federal filings. The courtroom screen flickered to life. First came the CNBC crawl I had been waiting for. Breaking. Quantum-resistant encryption breakthrough secures $2.7 billion multi-year DoD contract. Lead inventor Dr. Lydia Moreau, former critical care nurse, revolutionizes cybersecurity landscape. My face, clear, composed, taken from my university ID photo, filled the screen. Then Bloomberg. From night shifts to national security, 62-year-old nurse turned quantum pioneer lands largest defense tech deal of the decade. The courtroom went dead silent, except for the low hum of the projector. Elena's face drained of color. Marcus's mouth actually fell open. My attorney continued in the calmest voice I'd ever heard. Your Honor, not only has the durable power of attorney been proven fraudulent through handwriting analysis and notary bribery records, but the petitioner's entire financial narrative collapses when you consider that the respondent, my client, has been the principal investigator on a classified project whose recent success renders the petitioner's crypto losses and asset stripping scheme both irrelevant and potentially criminal. We have also referred the matter to the SEC and FBI for review of possible securities fraud tied to the Delaware LLC used to siphon funds. He slid a thick binder across the table. Inside were the irrevocable trust documents I had executed 6 years earlier, naming only myself as trustee, with successor provisions that explicitly excluded Elena and Marcus in the event of any financial abuse finding. The judge didn't even need closing arguments. He vacated the power of attorney on the spot, denied the guardianship petition, and issued a temporary restraining order barring both of them from any contact with me or my property. The realtor's lockbox was to be removed within 24 hours. The house, still legally and financially mine, would not be sold. As the bailiff escorted a stunned Elena and Marcus toward the exit, my daughter finally found her voice. "Mom, this is ridiculous. We were just trying to help. You can't do this to family." I looked at her, one long, steady look that held every unpaid bill, every sacrificed vacation, every night I chose her tuition over new scrubs, and answered without raising my voice. "You stopped being my family the moment you changed my locks and tried to bury me in paperwork. From this point forward, the only thing you will receive from me is the bill for the forensic accountant and the civil judgment that's coming next." I walked out of that courthouse into the bright Chicago afternoon, the late autumn wind cutting clean across my face. My phone buzzed once, another frantic text from Elena. I didn't open it. I simply blocked the number, then Marcus's, then the entire family group chat. That night, I sat in my own kitchen again, the paint still fresh, the smell of it sharp in my nose, with a half-empty glass of bourbon on the counter beside me. The Ring doorbell camera I'd quietly reinstalled caught the moment Elena's Lexus slowed in front of the house, then sped away when she saw the new security system armed and the bright red "No Trespassing" signs I'd had installed that afternoon. I raised the glass in a quiet toast to no one but myself. The house was still mine. The patents were mine. The future, finally, unapologetically, was mine. And they would never, ever get another cent, another minute, or another glance from the woman they had tried to throw away like yesterday's trash. The first week after the courthouse hearing felt like stepping out of a freezer into pure, stinging oxygen. I woke up every morning in my own bed again. The same queen-sized mattress I'd shared with my husband for 31 years, now missing the heavy quilt Elena had donated to charity without asking. The walls still carried that sterile paint smell, but underneath it I could detect the faint trace of my own life. Old coffee rings on the nightstand, the dent in the carpet where my reading chair used to sit. I left the furniture in storage for now. Empty rooms suited the new version of me better. I didn't rush to fill the house with noise or people. Instead, I moved through the space like a ghost taking inventory. Every drawer I opened reminded me of what they had touched. The kitchen cabinet where I used to keep the emergency cash envelope, now empty except for a single yellowed receipt for $928, the exact monthly amount they had siphoned the 36 straight months under the guise of helping with my bills. I photographed it, dated it, and added it to the growing digital folder labeled simply Evidence. My attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Cho, who specialized in elder financial abuse cases, called me at 8:17 a.m. on day 9. Her voice was crisp, almost amused. "Lydia, the forensic accountant just finished the deep dive. They routed $412,000 through that Delaware LLC then bounced it into 3 different crypto exchanges before trying to bury the trail in stablecoin wallets. Marcus's venture fund took a 40% management fee on top of it. We've got timestamps, wallet addresses, and bank metadata that line up like dominoes. Illinois AG's office is interested. So is the SEC. I thanked her, hung up, and poured myself a second cup of black coffee. No sugar, no cream. The bitterness felt right. Elena and Marcus didn't disappear quietly. They still believed they could fix this with the right amount of pressure and charm. On day 11, my phone lit up with a restricted number. I let it go to voicemail, then played it on speaker while I stood at the kitchen counter, sorting through the stack of unopened mail they had, helpfully, forwarded to the motel before the judge ordered it returned. "Mum, this is getting ridiculous." Eleanor's voice filled the empty kitchen, polished and reasonable. The same tone she used when she wanted me to co-sign another student loan years ago. "We were protecting you. The house is too much for one person. Marcus and I have a beautiful condo unit picked out near the new senior village in Naperville. Ground floor, 24-hour staff, all utilities included. We can move your things back in this weekend. Just sign the paperwork and we can put all this ugliness behind us." I listened to the entire message twice, then saved it as Exhibit G. By day 14, the realtor finally removed the lockbox under court order. I watched from the living room window as the woman in the navy blazer fumbled with the combination, her face tight with embarrassment. When she drove away, I stepped outside for the first time in weeks and pulled the "for sale" sign out of the ground with my bare hands. The wood splintered satisfyingly against my palm. I carried it straight to the trash bin at the curb and dropped it in like dead weight. Neighbours started to notice. Mrs. Alvarez from 2 doors down brought over a foil-wrapped plate of tamales and didn't ask questions when I told her I was handling some family matters. Mr. Kowalski across the street simply nodded once when he saw me reinstalling the original mailbox numbers with fresh screws. No one offered pity. They offered quiet respect, the kind you give someone who just survived a house fire and came back swinging. Inside the house, the silence became my ally. I turned the spare bedroom into a makeshift lab. 2 monitors on a folding table, a stack of legal pads covered in equations, and a small server rack humming softly in the corner. Dr. Park had arranged secure remote access to the university's quantum computing cluster. Every night from 10 p.m. until 4 a.m. I refined the protocol, tightening the lattice-based cryptography layers that made my system resistant to both classical and emerging quantum attacks. The DoD program managers had no idea their star researcher was operating out of a suburban ranch with second-hand office furniture. They only knew the deliverables kept arriving ahead of schedule. I kept the news appearances to a minimum. A short Bloomberg interview filmed via secure link. My face framed against a plain white wall so no one could trace the location. I wore a simple black turtleneck and spoke in the same measured tone I once used to explain medication side effects to anxious families. When the anchor asked how a former critical care nurse ended up cracking one of the hardest problems in cybersecurity, I gave them the clean version. Night shifts give you a lot of quiet hours. I used them. I didn't mention the daughter who had tried to institutionalize me. I didn't need to. The internet did the rest. By the end of the 3rd week, the story had legs. Tech blogs picked it up. A viral Twitter thread titled, "Nurse by Day, Quantum Savior by Night," racked up 2.4 million views. Someone dug up my old nursing license photo and side-by-side it with the new headshot. The contrast was brutal and beautiful. Elena saw it. Of course she did. On a rainy Thursday evening, my doorbell camera caught her standing on the porch again, hair damp, designer coat clutched tight around her. Marcus waited in the car, engine running. She rang twice, then started speaking toward the camera like she thought I was watching live. "Mum, please, we saw the news. This is incredible. We're so proud of you. We never knew you were working on something this big. Let's talk. We can fix the misunderstanding." Family sticks together, right? Her voice cracked on the last word, the perfect mix of vulnerability and entitlement they had rehearsed in the car. I didn't answer. I simply armed the security system from my phone. The loud beep echoed through the house like a period at the end of a sentence. She stood there another 30 seconds, then turned and walked back to the Lexus. The red taillights disappeared down the street, swallowed by the rain. That same night, I opened the irrevocable trust documents again and reviewed the successor provisions with fresh eyes. My late husband's life insurance had been quietly rolled into a separate vehicle years ago. $4.2 million, principal now grown to $5.8 million through conservative index funds they had never known existed. The trust explicitly stated that any attempt at financial exploitation triggered automatic disinheritance and a clawback clause enforceable in civil court. I highlighted the relevant sections in yellow and emailed them to Rebecca Cho with one line: "Prepare the demand letter." I slept 6 full hours that night for the first time in months. When I woke, the house felt different, lighter, sharper, entirely mine. The half-empty bourbon glass from the night of the hearing still sat on the counter, untouched. I left it there as a reminder. Outside, the first frost of the season glittered on the lawn. Inside, lines of code scrolled across my monitors like quiet weapons being sharpened. They had tried to bury me. Instead, they had handed me the shovel, the map, and every reason I would ever need to make sure they never touched my life again. And I was only getting started. The weeks that followed Elena's rain-soaked plea on my porch became a masterclass in disciplined silence. I didn't answer the blocked numbers that started appearing on my caller ID. I didn't respond to the certified letters from their attorney that arrived in thick manila envelopes, each one demanding I cease and desist from defamatory online narratives, and threatening a separate defamation suit. I simply scanned every document, logged the postmark, and forwarded the PDFs to Rebecca Cho with the subject line, "Add to the file." Dr. Park checked in every Tuesday at exactly 7:15 a.m. via an encrypted video link. His silver beard filled the corner of my spare bedroom monitor while he reviewed the latest iterations of the lattice-based algorithm I had been refining. "You're not just patching holes anymore, Lydia," he said one morning, voice slow with the same quiet thrill he used to get when we caught a medication error on the night shift. "This latest key exchange protocol is bulletproof against Shor's algorithm. The university cluster is running the final simulations right now. DoD wants a classified briefing next month, but they still have no idea who the principal investigator really is." I nodded once, sipped my coffee, and pushed the latest patent amendment across the virtual desk. The provisional filings under my maiden name had cleared the USPTO examiners 2 days earlier. The full non-provisional applications were now locked behind attorney-client privilege. Timestamps ironclad. Every line of code watermarked with my digital signature. 14 months before the forgery. The paper trail was a loaded gun. While I worked, the forensic accountant they had tried to bury kept digging. His latest report landed in my inbox like a precision strike. Another $87,000 in consulting fees Marcus had funneled from my joint account into a shell entity that paid for Elena's luxury SUV lease and their ski trip to Aspen last winter. The metadata showed the transfers happened the same week I was covering double shifts to help with her startup runway. Rebecca attached a draft demand letter that would trigger the Irrevocable Trust's clawback clause the moment we filed. $499,000 in misappropriated principal, plus treble damages under Illinois financial exploitation statutes. The numbers were surgical. No emotion, just arithmetic. I printed the report, spread the yellowed pages across the dining table next to the half-empty bourbon glass that had become my silent witness, and let the stale scent of fresh ink mix with the faint trace of hospital antiseptic still clinging to my old scrubs. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of the server rack and the occasional beep of the security system arming itself at dusk. They didn't stop. Of course they didn't. On a Tuesday evening in early December, my sister-in-law Cynthia, Elena's godmother, and the one person I had once trusted with spare keys, showed up unannounced. I watched her through the Ring camera, her arms loaded with a foil-covered casserole, and that practiced concerned smile she wore at every family funeral. She rang the bell 3 times, then started talking directly into the lens. "Lydia, honey, Elena called me in tears. She says you're having some kind of breakdown, isolating yourself, making wild accusations. We're all worried. Let me in. We can pray about this together. Family doesn't turn its back." I let the recording run until she finally set the dish on the porch step and drove away. Then I saved the footage, forwarded it to Rebecca with a note about potential witness tampering, and dumped the casserole straight into the trash without opening it. The smell of congealed cheese lingered in the cold air like a cheap perfume from a past I no longer recognized. Marcus tried a different angle. 2 days later, a process server in a cheap suit knocked with papers for a temporary restraining order against me, claiming I was harassing them with baseless federal referrals and damaging their professional reputations. The filing included screenshots of the Bloomberg article and a tearful affidavit from Elena about how my sudden fame had triggered a paranoid episode. I almost laughed out loud in the empty foyer. Rebecca had the motion quashed before lunch. The judge who reviewed it was the same one from the guardianship hearing. He remembered the forged power of attorney and the Delaware LLC. His clerk emailed me the denial order with a single line in the remarks. "Frivolous. Sanctions hearing pending." Every failed attempt only sharpened the blade. I spent Christmas alone, by design. No tree, no lights, just the glow of dual monitors and a fresh pot of coffee. At 11:47 p.m. on December 24th, the secure portal pinged. The DoD contracting officer had approved the final milestone payment, $2.7 billion over 5 years, structured through a prime contractor that would shield my identity until the public announcement. My cut as principal inventor was already wired into the Irrevocable Trust's investment account. The principal balance ticked past $8.4 million while I watched, cursor hovering over the confirmation button. I clicked once. No fanfare, no celebration, just the quiet satisfaction of numbers moving in the right direction. Elena and Marcus kept the family group chat alive with carefully worded posts I could still see through a burner account Dr. Park had set up for monitoring. They posted photos of their new downtown loft captioned, "Grateful for new beginnings after a difficult season," and tagged distant cousins with messages about praying for Mum's health. Flying monkeys started texting me directly, old neighbours, a former colleague from the hospital, asking if I was okay and offering to mediate. I blocked every number without reply. The silence I returned was louder than any scream. By mid-January, the SEC had opened a formal inquiry into Legacy Bridge Holdings LLC. Rebecca called me at 6:42 a.m. to confirm the forensic accountant's findings had been subpoenaed. Marcus's venture fund was now under review for possible material omissions in their investor disclosures. Elena's name appeared in the filings as an authorized signer. The noose was tightening in real time, and they still thought the only problem was my stubbornness. I sat at the kitchen counter that morning, the same one where I had once signed their tuition checks, and reviewed the final draft of the civil complaint. Financial elder abuse. Conversion. Breach of fiduciary duty. The demand was simple: full restitution, attorney fees, and a permanent injunction barring them from any contact or proximity to my person or property. Attached was the Irrevocable Trust's clawback provision and a certified copy of the patent filings that proved my work predated every lie they had told. I signed the last page with a steady hand, scanned it, and hit send. Outside, the first real snow of the season began to fall, blanketing the lawn and covering the faint rectangle of dead grass where the for sale sign had stood. Inside, the server rack hummed steadily, running one last validation test on the quantum protocol that would soon be the backbone of national cybersecurity. I poured the last of the bourbon into the glass, raised it toward the empty room, and spoke to no one but the cold justice I had built from their betrayal. "You tried to erase me with paperwork," I said softly. "Now the paperwork is going to erase you." The glass clinked once against the counter. I didn't drink. I didn't need to. The takedown was no longer coming. It was already in motion. February brought steel grey skies and a new level of desperation from the people who once called me Mum. The SEC inquiry had officially landed on their doorstep, and the letters from their attorney stopped being polite demands and started carrying the faint odour of panic. I received a fresh stack of manila envelopes almost daily now. Motions to dismiss, requests for mediation, even a pathetic offer to return a portion of the drained funds if I would drop the civil complaint and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Rebecca forwarded each one with a single-word note. Denied. I spent most of my days in the converted spare bedroom, the hum of the server rack now a constant companion that felt more like family than the blood relatives trying to destroy me. The quantum protocol had moved beyond simulation. We were running live stress tests on a classified, air-gapped system Dr. Park had arranged access to through old government contacts. Every successful run tightened the noose around the narrative Eleanor and Marcus had spent months crafting about the frail, confused woman who needed to be protected from herself. One Thursday afternoon, the doorbell camera caught Marcus standing on my porch alone for the first time. No Eleanor. No rehearsed smile. His expensive coat was unbuttoned despite the cold, tie loosened, eyes bloodshot. He spoke directly into the lens with the kind of forced calm that cracks at the edges. "Lydia, we know about the patents. We know you've been working on this for years behind our backs. This doesn't have to get ugly in public. We can still work something out. A percentage, a consulting role for Eleanor, family equity. Think about your legacy." I watched the recording 3 times while sipping coffee at the kitchen counter, then saved it under Exhibit K, attempted extortion. The man who had forged my signature and tried to sell my house was now begging for crumbs from the very work he had tried to bury me for. I didn't reply. The security system stayed armed. The new deadbolts I had installed remained locked. Instead, I doubled down. The full patent application package was filed that same week under my maiden name, with priority dates that predated every transaction they had made with my money. The DoD contracting officer sent a secure congratulations note along with the first tranche of the milestone payment. $14.2 million wired directly into the irrevocable trust. The balance now sat at just over $9.7 million, growing quietly while their leveraged crypto positions continued to hemorrhage value. Rebecca called me the next morning with the kind of voice lawyers use when they're about to deliver good news wrapped in steel. The clawback motion has been granted. The judge signed off on freezing the Delaware LLC accounts this morning. Forensic accounting shows they moved another $63,000 out right before the hearing, trying to hide it in an offshore trading account. We have it all. The AG's office is coordinating with the SEC now. Criminal referral is likely within 30 days. I thanked her and hung up. Then I did something I hadn't done since the locks were changed. I walked through every room of the house slowly, touching the walls I had paid for, the floors I had cleaned on my knees after long shifts. The paint smell had finally faded, replaced by the faint scent of old books and the lavender sachets I had tucked into drawers years ago. This house was no longer a crime scene. It was a fortress. Elena tried one last flying monkey campaign through the extended family. My cousin Denise from Ohio called me crying, saying Elena told her I had developed a gambling problem and was being manipulated by shady tech people into risky government contracts. Denise begged me to let the family help get me back on track. I listened to the entire performance, then told her in the calmest voice I could muster that if she ever contacted me again on Eleanor's behalf, she would be added to the restraining order list. The line went silent. I blocked the number. By late February, the media pressure was building to a breaking point. A major tech podcast had somehow obtained my nursing license photo and was teasing an upcoming episode titled The Night Nurse Who Broke Quantum Cryptography. Bloomberg ran a short piece naming Dr. Lydia Moreau as the anonymous lead inventor on the DoD's new flagship encryption project. My face hadn't been shown yet, but it was only a matter of time. I used those weeks to prepare the final pieces. I met Rebecca in person for the first time at a small cafe 2 suburbs away. She slid a thick binder across the table containing the completed civil complaint, ready for filing the moment we chose. Inside were color-coded tabs, unauthorized transfers, forged documents, LLC filings, trust provisions, patent priority proofs, and the pending SEC investigation summary. The total restitution demand had grown to $1.87 million, including treble damages and legal fees. "You're ready whenever you want to pull the trigger," she told me. I nodded once and paid for both our coffees in cash. That night, I sat at the dining table with the half-empty bourbon glass beside me again, the same one from the night of the first hearing. The server in the back room was running its final overnight validation. Tomorrow, the DoD would make the official announcement. Tomorrow, my face would be on every financial news outlet in the country. I stared at the yellowed receipts still spread across the table, the ones that documented every dollar they had stolen while I worked night shifts to keep their dreams alive. I picked up the top one, the $928 monthly siphon, and slipped it into the front of the binder as the very first exhibit. They had treated me like disposable trash, something to be locked away and liquidated when it stopped being convenient. Tomorrow the world would see exactly who I had become while they were busy trying to erase me. And the paperwork I was about to drop on their heads would be nothing short of surgical. The morning of March 3rd dawned cold and merciless over Chicago, the kind of grey that makes every streetlight feel like a warning. I dressed in the same navy blazer from the guardianship hearing, paired it with a crisp white blouse I had bought the week before, with trust funds they had never touched, and drove to the Dirksen Federal Courthouse downtown. Rebecca Cho met me on the marble steps at 8:42 a.m., her briefcase swinging like a pendulum set to strike. The case had been fast-tracked after the SEC referral turned into a formal investigation. Today was the emergency hearing on the civil complaint for financial elder abuse, conversion, and breach of fiduciary duty. But everyone in the hallway knew the real fireworks were about to detonate in open court. Elena and Marcus were already seated at the defense table when I walked in, their faces tight and pale under the fluorescent lights. Elena's designer suit looked slept in. Marcus kept flexing his jaw like he was chewing glass. Their attorney shuffled papers with the frantic energy of a man who knew the ship was taking on water. The judge called the case at 9:05 sharp. Rebecca stood first, voice level and surgical, and asked the court to admit the full binder of evidence we had spent weeks perfecting. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Page by page, the clerk projected the documents onto the courtroom screen, while Rebecca narrated in the same calm tone she might use to read a grocery list. Here, Your Honour, are the notarized affidavits proving the durable power of attorney was forged using a notary paid $5,000 in cash by the petitioners. Here are the forensic accountant's findings on $499,000 in unauthorized transfers routed through Legacy Bridge Holdings, LLC. Here is the irrevocable trust executed 6 years ago with explicit clawback provisions triggered by financial exploitation. And here, she said, sliding the final tab across the table, are the USPTO priority filings under Dr. Lydia Moreau's maiden name, time-stamped 14 months before any of the petitioner's actions. The courtroom stayed silent except for the soft click of the projector advancing slides. Eleanor's hands were clenched so tight her knuckles went white. Marcus stared straight ahead like a man watching his own obituary scroll past. Then Rebecca dropped the real hammer. At this exact moment, Your Honour, the Department of Defense is issuing its official press release on the $2.7 billion quantum-resistant encryption contract. The lead inventor is seated right here in this courtroom. The work the petitioners tried to bury my client for is now the backbone of national cybersecurity, and every dollar they siphoned is traceable straight back to their failed crypto scheme. She hit a key on her laptop. The screen switched from exhibits to a live feed of the CNBC ticker already crawling across the bottom. Breaking. Night nurse turned quantum pioneer lands historic $2.7 billion DoD deal. My face filled the frame. The same university ID photo they had used in every article. Calm and composed. The caption reading, Dr. Lydia Moreau, former critical care nurse, revolutionizes global cybersecurity. The entire courtroom seemed to inhale at once. A low murmur rippled through the gallery. Elena made a small choking sound and grabbed Marcus's sleeve. Their attorney tried to object, voice cracking, but the judge held up one hand and kept his eyes on the screen as Bloomberg cut in next. The anchor announcing the same story with my name and face in full view. I sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table, the faint scent of fresh courthouse coffee drifting from the clerk's desk. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The cold satisfaction that had been building since the night they changed my locks simply settled into my bones like winter steel. Rebecca kept speaking over the rising noise. We are also filing today's motion to refer the entire matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for criminal investigation into wire fraud, securities violations, and elder financial abuse under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. The petitioner's Delaware LLC has already been frozen by court order this morning. Any attempt to liquidate remaining assets will be considered contempt. The judge didn't hesitate. He granted every single motion on the spot. The civil judgment was entered for the full $1.87 million plus interest and attorney fees. A permanent restraining order issued immediately, barring Elena and Marcus from any contact, physical proximity within 500 feet, or any future claim against my property or the irrevocable trust. The clerk stamped the orders with a heavy thud that echoed off the wood-panelled walls like a gavel made of finality. Elena finally broke. She stood so fast her chair scraped backward, voice raw and cracking as she turned toward me in front of the entire courtroom. "Mum, you can't do this. We were trying to protect you. This is insane. You're destroying your own family over a misunderstanding." I looked at her the way you look at a patient who has just coded for the third time and still refuses to accept the inevitable. I kept my voice low, steady, and ice cold, so every word carried to the back row without effort. You changed the locks on the house I paid for with 28 years of night shifts. You forged my signature and tried to sell my life to cover your gambling losses. You told the neighbours I had dementia while you staged my living room for buyers. The only thing I am destroying today is the illusion that you were ever entitled to a single cent of what I built after you threw me away like yesterday's trash. Marcus tried to pull her back down, but she shook him off. Tears starting now, the kind that used to work on me when she was 17 and needed tuition money. The bailiff stepped forward on the judge's quiet nod and escorted both of them toward the exit doors. Elena kept looking back over her shoulder, mouth moving in silent pleas that no longer reached me. I stayed seated until the courtroom emptied, the red blinking light of the security camera in the corner the only witness to the final moment. Rebecca slid the signed judgment across the table with a small nod of respect. "It's done, Lydia. The trust balance is already reflecting the first clawback deposit. Their accounts are frozen. The SEC will handle the rest." I signed the last receipt without a word, then walked out of the courthouse into the sharp March wind. My phone stayed silent for the first time in months, because I had blocked every last number weeks ago. The news vans were already lining the sidewalk, but I slipped out the side entrance Dr. Park had arranged and drove home alone. That evening, I sat at my own kitchen counter again, the half-empty bourbon glass from the night of the first hearing now filled once more. The server rack in the spare room hummed its steady validation song. Outside, the security system beeped as it armed itself at dusk. On the counter beside the glass lay the final manila envelope from Rebecca, containing the stamped restraining order and the wire confirmation showing $1.87 million restored to the trust. I raised the glass toward the empty room, toward the life they had tried to erase, and spoke the only words that mattered anymore. You treated me like trash until the world saw exactly who I am. Now the only thing left between us is a court order and the cold arithmetic of everything you lost. The bourbon burned clean and final on the way down. I set the glass beside the yellowed receipt for $928 that had started it all, then stood and walked through my house room by room, turning on every light until the entire place glowed like a beacon against the coming night. They would never set foot here again. They would never touch another dollar, and the woman they had tried to bury was finally, completely free. The weeks after the federal courthouse emptied out felt like the slow, deliberate unwinding of a noose they had tied for themselves. Rebecca Cho called me every Tuesday morning at precisely 9:15 a.m., with updates delivered in the same crisp, emotionless tone she used when reading court orders aloud. The Delaware LLC had been fully liquidated under the clawback judgment. $1.87 million restored to my irrevocable trust within 72 hours. Interest and treble damages already compounding. Marcus's venture fund was shuttered by the SEC the following week after their investigators traced the leveraged crypto losses straight back to the unauthorized wire transfers. Elena's name appeared in the final enforcement action as a co-signer, triggering a separate freeze on every joint account they still controlled. Their downtown loft, purchased with the last of the siphoned money, was now listed for short sale. The realtor's sign in their building lobby carried the same sterile white and blue branding they had once planted in my front yard. I didn't gloat. I simply logged every detail into the master evidence file on my laptop and moved on with my day. The permanent restraining order did the rest. On a rainy afternoon in late March, the doorbell camera recorded Elena standing at the edge of the 500-foot perimeter, soaked, phone pressed to her ear, voice shaking as she left a voicemail I never played. She begged through the lens anyway, calling me the only mother she had ever known, claiming the whole thing had spiraled out of control because Marcus had hidden the losses from her, too. The security system beeped its familiar arming tone when she finally stepped back, and the red light on the camera blinked once, like a quiet period at the end of their story. I forwarded the footage to Rebecca with a one-line note: "Enforce the order. No exceptions." The next day, a sheriff's deputy delivered the formal violation notice to their temporary apartment across town. Another $15,000 in contempt sanctions added to the ledger. Marcus tried one final angle through his attorney, offering a confidential settlement that would have dropped the criminal referral in exchange for a public statement saying it was all a misunderstanding. Rebecca laughed once on the phone when she read it to me, the sound sharp and final. I told her to reject it in writing and attach the full forensic accountant's report as Exhibit A. The U.S. Attorney's Office opened the criminal file the week after that. Wire fraud, securities violations, elder financial exploitation. The numbers were ironclad. $499,000 misappropriated, forged power of attorney, notary bribery, the Delaware shell that had tried to hide it all. Their attorney stopped calling after that. I kept the house exactly as it was for one last month. The spare bedroom lab was dismantled piece by piece. The server rack shipped to the university under DoD escort. The monitors sold to a local tech recycler. Every yellowed receipt from the dining table went into a sealed archive box, labelled simply, "Closed." The half-empty bourbon glass stayed on the counter until the final night, a silent witness to every stage of the cold fury that had carried me through. On the last evening I sat there alone, the kitchen lights low, the faint scent of fresh paint finally gone, and replaced by the clean smell of the lavender sachets I had tucked back into the drawers. My phone buzzed once with a news alert. Former VC executive and wife face federal charges in elder fraud case tied to quantum tech pioneer. The article named them both. It mentioned the $2.7 billion DoD contract again, my face on the thumbnail, and the irrevocable trust that had protected every cent they tried to steal. I read it once, then turned the screen face down and raised the glass in the quiet room. You spent months trying to erase me with paperwork and lies. Now the paperwork has erased everything you built on my back. The trust is untouchable. The patents are mine. The house is paid off and soon to be sold to a young nurse starting her first job. And the only thing left of you in my life is a court order that will outlast both of us. I drank the last sip, the bourbon burning clean and final, then set the glass in the sink and walked through every room one final time. The security system beeped as I armed it from my phone. The new owner would take possession in 30 days. I had already wired the proceeds into a separate account that would fund the Quantum Research Foundation I was quietly establishing under my maiden name. No family, no strings, just pure forward motion. The moving truck came at dawn the next morning. I loaded the last 2 suitcases into my car, locked the front door for the final time, and drove away without looking back. The suburban streets blurred past, the Chicago skyline shrinking in the rear view until it disappeared behind the highway curve. My new place waited 2 states away, a quiet mountain cabin with high-speed fiber and 0 family history, purchased outright with trust funds they had never known existed. Dr. Park had already arranged classified access to the next phase of the project. The DoD briefing was scheduled for next month. Life, finally, belonged only to me. I never unblocked their numbers. I never answered the letters that still arrived through Rebecca's office. When the criminal trial date was set, I simply forwarded the subpoena notice to my attorney and booked a flight out of the country for the duration. The boundaries were steel. The severance was absolute. No flying monkeys, no tearful calls, no last-minute attempts at love bombing. They had treated me like disposable trash until the world saw my face on the global news as the woman who had just secured the largest defense tech contract in a decade. Now the only thing they would ever see of me again was the red, blinking light of a security camera and the cold finality of a court stamp. I pulled into the driveway of the cabin as the sun set behind the pines, the air sharp with the scent of mountain cedar and new beginnings. I killed the engine, stepped out and stood there for a long moment with nothing but the wind and the quiet hum of my own future. They had tried to bury me. Instead, they had handed me the keys to an empire and the perfect excuse to walk away forever. And the woman they threw away like yesterday's trash was finally, completely free.